So one of my subscribers, Spaffon1, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, asked if I could just talk a little bit about the materials that I use, or rather the canvases that I use to paint on. So I'll just bring up a few things. I'm going to start with wood panels. No, actually I'll just start by saying this. If you're a hobbyist and if you regularly make a lot of work that you're not happy with and you toss it, then don't waste your time spending too much on materials. I know that there are a lot of say for example canvas wrapped cardboard panels, which are fine for studies or what have you. Again, I sort of put that in the arena of hobbyist because it is only cardboard at its root, and you can paint on different types of paper as well, I suppose. There are canvases out there that are really cheap. I don't know what they are, but they're not cotton canvas. They're almost like some sort of plasticized material. They feel like they're part plastic, very thin, very weak. I imagine that's hobbyists as well. I don't. My knowledge is really limited in that area because it's just I don't even touch that stuff. I won't even dare go there. But for panels, there are a lot of artists use birch plywood, which is quite good. Now, I imagine you can buy it pre-gessoed, or you will buy gesso and apply that yourself. Give it a couple of coats, and then you should be good to go. On all of, personally, I use a. It's sort of like a pressed wooden board, very tightly pressed. It's actually, I don't know if it's still around, and this I think is the trade name, but it used to be called masonite, the type of wood. You could just go to the lumber store and you could buy sheets and cut up, panels to suit the sizes that you wanted, and then gesso the panels, or gesso the whole sheet and cut it up. Regardless of what you're using, when it comes to panels, I personally gesso one side and I will seal the edges and the back, and I just use clear varnish for that because it's nice to minimize the amount of moisture that gets into that wood. You don't want it swelling. You don't want dimensional instability. So whether it's birch or plywood or regular plywood or whatever you use, it's good to seal it all the way around. Paint it all the way around, except of course for your gessoed side, the side you're going to paint on. When I get the masonite, it's basically 1/8 inch thick. Masonite is the thickness, and that's pretty thin. But that's because I'll only use my wood panels. I only work from 5 by 7 inches up to 12 by 16 inches. So it doesn't get that big. So they're strong enough considering they're really fairly compact. Okay. I don't buy sheets of. Oh, you don't want to get tempered masonite. Tempered is heat tempered and compressed so much that the gesso won't bond with it. It's such a shiny hard surface. Any kind of material that's too shiny and hard, gesso just won't bond with it. You need a little bit of texture in there. You need a little absorbency. The liquids in the gesso have to be able to permeate the surface. Okay, didn't want to forget that. There is a company called, I don't know if it's all over Canada, but there are a few outlets here. It's a chain store called Opus Art Supplies. They sell something called Opus Artboard. I think that's what it's called. And I buy larger pieces of that, still not huge, but manageable. It's pre-gessoed. I'll take it home and cut it up into sizes on my table saw, the sizes that I want. Okay. What else do we have here? Okay, I think that covers the panels. and I can only speak to what I'm used to. In general, my dad was an art restorer as well as a professional artist, and he trained at the Academy of Arts and Related Sciences, Arts and Related Sciences in The Hague, in Holland. Well, obviously decades ago. So he's very fussy about how things are done, and his philosophy was certainly once your work is available for sale, you want to, within the parameters of economic viability for you, you want to provide the best quality workmanship and materials that you can as a foundation for your paintings. So that's why I don't go real cheap. Now, it's not economically viable for my sort of price bracket and the type of work that I do to buy linen. Something like Belgian linen used to be, sort of the favored amongst the highest quality linen. You would buy it pre-sized, ready to go, fantastic stuff, worth a fortune. And as time has gone on, it's become so expensive. I have used it in some much larger works. A commission that I did quite a number of years ago now. I wanted to use heavy linen because it's just simply, the longevity is much better with linen over cotton. Cotton in its raw state is, very short fibers, and linen can be, much longer fibers. Plus it's a much oilier substance, linen. So it's the stem of a flax plant, really. So, with the strength of those fibers, it just becomes a much better, but albeit far more expensive canvas. So typically what I use are all cotton canvases. Okay, I think I've blithered enough about that now. Okay, panels. My canvases, side stapled used to be the way to go with canvases. Well, it wasn't the way to go, it was just sort of the industry norm. And then years ago, you began to see more wraparound canvases. I think that's superior, really. Excuse me. So here we have a wraparound. This is just a thin wraparound. It's pretty standard. These are typically 3/4 inch thick on, front to the back, and they are typically 1 5/8 bottom to top of the stretcher bar itself. What do we have here? Okay, something like this I'm fine without any braces in. If you get over 30 by 30 inches, you want to start to see some kind of bracing of some sort in the back. Be it a vertical and horizontal, or corner, knee braces in the corner, something along those lines. And that, of course, the exception to that is when you have thick or deep wraparound canvases. Then we're using much heavier stretcher bars, and there's so much more strength to the bars that you can get away with a larger size without having to have it braced. Okay, what do we have here? I wrote notes because without notes, this video would be done already and I would have forgotten all kinds of things that I wanted to say. Okay. Yeah, I used to, when my dad was still alive and painting, he and I would go in together on bulk canvases, and we would buy, quite large orders. At that time, our supplier, who I don't think even exists anymore, was very consistent in their size, which is really important because these canvases have to go in frames, which are very often pre-made. And the finishing frames on canvases are for paintings are usually very accurate. The canvases themselves are sometimes quite inaccurate. And anyway, the quality was always good and consistent, and then that started to fall apart. And I didn't want to go through all the effort and do a bunch of driving, and we wouldn't have them shipped. We'd save a few dollars and we'd just take the drive together to go and get them and take them home in a van. It wasn't worth it because you'd have them all bundled together, you'd bring them home and you start to see that these things were some were warping pretty badly, insufficiently braced, all kinds of problems, and we wanted to keep our quality up. So I've just kind of carried that on. As a professional artist, it is my duty to do that. Okay, so that kind of ended that era. Now when I get canvases, and there is no one place that I get them, but I do favor a place. That's partly because it's in the same town. It's in the town where I live, well, near where I live. Julianne's Art Supply. It's a small art store in Chilliwack, British Columbia. They order them in. Not sure where they all come from. There are a few different brands that they carry. Sometimes I will use one brand, sometimes another. Your best canvas is really the one that is not warped, that the measurements are reasonably accurate on. I'll get to that in a minute. So I will inspect each canvas, no matter where I get it from. I'll have a look at it. I'll check the stretcher bars. I'll check the stretcher bars for warping, for knots. If the knots are too big, it could certainly, don't forget those stretcher bars have a lot of tension on them, and it could really that tension would end up warping the stretcher bar, eventually maybe even breaking it. I check for splitting. I check for correct bracing, making sure there are enough braces on a canvas. This one's just fine, by the way. Doesn't need braces. Then, I'll eye up the canvas, from one end to the other. I'll just sort of grab it like this, and I will have a look down it, and as you can see, there's no great big sag there. Might look a bit like it, but there isn't. It's mostly because there's a double fold over the stretcher bar on either end of the canvas, your end and my end. So as long as that's reasonably straight, as long as it's not doing this or this or this, and I check all four corners, or all four sides rather, then it passes that test. So that takes care of the warping issue. That takes care of the stretcher bars, really. Now I have a look at the canvas. Is the weave inconsistent? Now, it's almost always just fine. It's so rare is there a problem. So rarely is there a problem. I just give it a cursory look over. If there's an issue, you'll know it pretty quickly. I have held it up to, if it's convenient, some light, because I have actually, believe it or not, had a canvas that looked okay, but there seemed to be sort of a, not a seam, but a bit of a, I don't know, the warp or the weft wasn't closely enough compacted when they were weaving. I held it up to my face, and I could actually, if it was close enough to my eyes, I could actually see a person's face enough to recognize them on the other side of the canvas. That's how poor the quality was, and nobody seemed to care when I pointed it out to them. So, alright, fine. Okay, inconsistent weave, that can be an issue, but it's almost never an issue. Knots, where they tie one end of a fiber to the other, almost never an issue. That really has been more the case with linen, and that is also really more the case with very poor quality linen. So anyway, that's usually not what you have to worry about. What I have seen the odd time is that the warp and the weft have not been parallel to the stretcher bars. The whole canvas was a little bit askew, like it wasn't mounted properly. That's still very, very rare. If it's slightly off, it's not a big problem. It's very rare, but I have seen it. Anyway, so you're checking that your warp and weft are parallel to your stretcher bars. I check the measurements of canvases for accuracy. It seems to me that, and it seems to be ubiquitous, that when I look at canvases, most of the ones that I find are slightly larger than what is stated on the package or the shelf. I think that's because what they're doing is they're using their jigs to make their stretcher frames exactly a certain size. Say, for instance, a 16 by 20 inch canvas. Then they're wrapping it with canvas And then they have to do a double fold or triple fold, depending on wraparound or side edge or edge stapled or whatever. What is that? That's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. See right here, it's basically got five layers of canvas. Up here, not so much. Anyway, we'll call that a double fold. Makes for a bit of a bump. So your canvas, your stretcher bars, which started out as exactly 16 by 20 inches, have now become 16 and an eighth by 20 and an eighth, and sometimes even bigger. So that makes it kind of hard for them to fit into those finishing frames. Again, that has been a bit of an issue with one of my galleries at times, because it just seemed, well, sometimes I just couldn't find something that fit. They were always slightly too big. But seeing as I say, it seems pretty ubiquitous these days, I guess that amongst the industry they've sorted that stuff out. Again, it's because they have to go to galleries. You know, the paintings are hanging on the wall for a lot of money, and they have to be done right. Okay, they tend to be a bit bigger than a star. Oh, also, I also measure diagonally from corner to corner and make sure it matches up corner to corner here. To make sure it's square. Canvas has to be square. Because then if it's not square, it's not going to fit in a frame either. And I've even seen them sometimes where it was out so far that you could visually see, you know, maybe 3/8 of an inch or half an inch out of square. Well, you can't do that on a canvas like this. Got to do better than that. Okay, sorry about all the whining. Again, this is only stuff, you know, I'm beholden to a certain level of quality, so that's what I got to stick to. Don't have to be so fussy if you're not selling your work. And if you're not worried about, you know, and if you paint the edges of your canvas, you're not worried about a frame. So you can get away with a lot more latitude. Or if you have a box frame or a shadow box frame or something along those lines. Okay, I don't know if I really have much more to say on it. I'm not going to give you different trade names because they all, some are in general better than others, but they all seem to sort of fall down periodically, and you know, as with anything, mistakes are made and you'll have a canvas that's not great, which is why now I'm very fussy, very persnickety about that. Measure and inspect everyone. So that's why I say, as long as your stretcher bars aren't too tiny, you know, as long as they're big enough, beefy enough for the size of the canvas, as long as it's real canvas, not plastic, as long as they're not warped, as long as, you know, if you take your whole painting too, you don't want, shall I do this here? Okay, I'm just going to show you that. I don't want the front of my painting to do this and the back of my painting to do this, or I'll end up with quite a warped painting as well. Even though the individual bars may not be warped, sometimes the painting as a whole can be. Yeah, your best canvas is absolutely the one that just give it a good visual inspection. You know, use a few pointers like that. And if you have any questions, you know, normally the staff at the art store can help you. All right, if you have more questions, let me know. Again, I don't want to give out trade names. I don't want to go down that route. I don't endorse anybody. Nobody endorses me, etc., etc. And you know, sometimes I'll be looking at a higher line of canvases. Next to it is a lower line of canvas, or more medium quality. And I'll pick through them, and I will find one of medium quality that is actually much better than the higher quality brand name. I don't go to low value cheapy stuff at all, never do that, but yeah, it comes down to being fussy. I think that's it. I hope I covered it. As I say, any questions, leave them in the comments, and I hope you have a good day. This has a painting on the other side of it that's been hanging around my house for a while. I'm still not quite sure how to finish it, so it's been on video before. I'm not going to show you again until it's actually done. Anyway, it's not a nightmare, it's just a nuisance. But I am actually going to go and buy a canvas, I think just one, because I want to do a larger one again. And I just buy it one at a time. Okay, see you next time.